Welcome back to From the Shed End podcast with myself, T.Dot. As always, thank you very much for joining me. Now, before we get into the content, as always, please subscribe to the channel. Go and smash the subscribe button and like this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments as well about Dino Zagreb that we're playing tomorrow. Now, Graham Potter has just held his press conference ahead of the game. Not much that came out of it really that we probably didn't already know. Two key absentees for tomorrow will be Kepa, who damaged a muscle strain during the Brighton game, and Mateo Kovacic will miss this game as well. There was some good news in terms of Koulibaly, who is fit for the game tomorrow as well. But there were a lot of questions raised around in the press conference around Brighton performance and how we lost 4-1 to them, and of course Graham Potter answered them as best as he could. But I do feel that this is a time for Graham Potter to reflect on that game and also potentially utilize some of the squad a bit better. So I'm expecting to see a lot of rotation against Dino Zagreb. This almost feels like a nothing game in terms of we've already qualified for the last 16 of the Champions League. We've got a massive game against Arsenal coming up on Sunday. It's a massive game. We can't really afford to lose that. And of course, this gives Graham Potter the opportunity to play the likes of Carney Chukwuemeka, potentially Zakaria, who might actually get a run out in the game tomorrow. He was mentioned in the press conference earlier, and Graham Potter did say that he is part of the squad. He's also ready and fit to play, and he's been training well. So we might see Zakaria play tomorrow, which I'm hoping part of me does get to see that, because I want to see what he can do for the squad, what he can do as part of the team. But I do think, is it too little too late for him? Obviously, the World Cup's coming up in less than a month now, I think 19 days. And you'll have the January transfer window. So this might come too late in the day for Denis Zakaria, if we ever do see him play in a Chelsea shirt as well. But Armando Broja was part of the press conference as well. He gave a lot of insight into how things are at Stamford Bridge for players at the moment. You would expect him to play, obviously, with Aubameyang again being rested in the game, like he was at Brighton as well. So I think he'll be up for the Arsenal game. He'll understand that this is a game which he might need to sit out. And yeah, you know, I think we might see Armando Broja leading the line tomorrow for us against Dino Zagreb. Now, there was a question raised in the press conference around Raheem Sterling's performances recently for Chelsea. Obviously, the games that he did play and he scored in, I think they were under Thomas Tuchel, but he has dipped in form, and I think that's something that, you know, we question when it's Mason Mount, or we talk about when it's Kai Havertz, or when it was Timo Werner, Hakim Ziyech. So it's only right that we do the same for Raheem Sterling, who hasn't been putting in the performances that we expect to see of him. But like I said in the previous video, there are signs in there that maybe Pep was right. Maybe Pep actually realised that we don't actually need, you are surplus to requirements, Raheem Sterling at Manchester City. So I feel like we're kind of seeing a little bit of that now. And obviously as well, you've got to remember, you know, you had Rodri, you had David Silva, you had Bernardo Silva, he had Kevin De Bruyne, he had Phil Foden. He had all these quality players around him, much better than he has at Chelsea. But it is still no excuse for some of the performances that Raheem Sterling is putting in. And in my opinion, I wouldn't start him in tomorrow's game. I don't think he deserves it. I think he probably needs to sit out a couple of games to understand that, you know, he was given a lot of reassurances, I think, when he signed for the club, from what Thomas Tuchel said when he signed, that, you know, he's reassured him that he does have a massive role to play at Chelsea. But sometimes that can go to a player's head. Sometimes they can think that they're untouchable or irreplaceable in terms of the position that they play. But it hasn't really worked out for Raheem Sterling in the last couple of games. And you do sense maybe he needs a rest. Maybe he needs to sit out a few games and just warm the bench up a little bit. But I'm hoping he doesn't start tomorrow. I'd rather see him maybe refreshed and ready to go against Arsenal if needs be. But yeah, let's talk about some of the team news that came out as well earlier today. So obviously, as we mentioned, there'll be no Kepa, there'll be no Mateo Kovacic, but there were some key additions to the training session that was held earlier today. Eddie Beach, who's part of the academy, he's a goalkeeper. He has trained with the first team. He's expected to be on the bench as one of the goalkeepers, along with Marcus Bettinelli tomorrow as well, with Edouard Mendy returning back in goal after coming on for Kepa during the Brighton game. We've also got fellow youngsters in Dion Rankin and Lewis Hall as well, and Zach Sturge, who also trained as part of today's training session. You'd expect to see them on the bench. Again, there was a question thrown at Graham Potter today, whether he'll utilise the youth system that he's got currently at Cobham. And he kind of danced around the question, didn't really give us a real answer, but I don't think we're going to see it. All three of them, if any of them potentially come on, I think they're there just to make up the numbers and allow some of the players that will feature on Sunday against Arsenal, they'll hopefully come on and play. But it will be interesting to see how he lines up. Obviously, I mentioned Kane Chukwuemeka as well, who did train with the squad today, but on his own after missing the Brighton game as well. So there's going to be a question mark whether he's fit enough to start the game. Do you bring him on during the game as well? But I do think we need to... we're going to need to utilise the squad as much as possible for the next 4 or 5 games. You know, we've got some big games coming up with Manchester City in the Cup. We've got Newcastle, as I said, about Arsenal as well. So some big games just before that World Cup kicks off that we need to try and rotate and rest players where possible, because we are seeing injuries coming into play now with Mateo Kovacic, Wesley Fofana. Koulibaly is just coming back from an injury. Reece James has gone to Dubai with Wesley Fofana to try and get his rehabilitation going, hopefully before the World Cup. So there's a lot that I think we need to take into consideration, especially when we've got games very much like Dino Zagreb that we don't really have to put out our strongest squad. But let's talk about Zagreb, because the first game that we played against them, it was obviously Thomas Tuchel's last game in charge. It was a poor performance from us, but I do feel that the atmosphere played a massive part. I think at the time as well, there was definitely unrest within the squad and Thomas Tuchel and maybe potentially Todd Bowley as well. So I do think there was a lot of factors heading into that game. The way that we played as well wasn't really satisfying. It wasn't really the Chelsea that we know. So I think there was a lot that we needed to put into consideration for it. But what I do want to say, I'm expecting a totally different game when we go to, when Dinamo Zagreb return to Stamford Bridge tomorrow. I'm expecting us to put in a much better performance. I think we've got the quality to do so. So I'm hoping that we can do that. But of course, let's head over to the lineup, because they're bottom of the group. We're top of the group, as I said. I'm expecting a lot of changes. I'm expecting us to go into this game with some key changes in place. So yeah, I'm hoping that we can. Now I've gone for a back four. I'm going to say that from the jump, from the start. I've gone for a back four simply because we haven't got the defenders. We haven't got the centre backs at the moment. Wesley Fofana's out. Cucurella has played there, I think, 3 times now and hasn't really looked comfortable. And I know what Brighton fans have been telling me all week, that this is what Graham Potter does. He likes to rotate and experiment with the squad. But this is Chelsea Football Club. This is not Brighton, with all greatest respect. If you don't have the players, you need to assess that. You need to adapt to what you have available to you. So I've gone for Mendy in goal, because that's an obvious choice. As I mentioned, you know, Eddie Beach and Marcus Bettinelli will potentially be on the bench for that game tomorrow. I've gone for Cesar Azpilicueta as my right back in a back four. I feel like this is the most perfect situation for Azpilicueta. Hopefully, I mean, Dinamo Zagreb actually did press us, if you remember, in the first game, and they were very on top of us for, you know, let's say 60% of the game. They actually did really do well against us. So I'm hoping if we play a back four, which I'll get onto in a minute, around the midfield, and it gives us that extra body in midfield. But I think with Azpilicueta, he's suited more as a right back now. As I've said on here many times before, he doesn't have the legs to go forward and to bomb forward and to get back and track back to watch what's behind him as well. So I think if he's got a role tomorrow which allows him to be more defensive and to be able to defend more so than attack, I think he'll be better suited to play as a right back as opposed to a right wing back in this situation. I've gone for Trevor Chalobah and Koulibaly as my centre backs, which I think will work well. Yes, it's a risk playing Koulibaly at the start of the game. I think I was sitting down when I was putting this lineup together, and I thought, what would I rather do? How often do you see your centre backs get subbed during a game? So I think if we can get Koulibaly through maybe, you know, the first 60 minutes of the game, depending on how the game's going, I'd potentially sub him off, maybe bring on Cucurella at a push if we need to. But I think, you know, we could easily maybe revert back to a back five then as well. I don't know, but I think we need to give Koulibaly the opportunity to play at least 40, 60 minutes of the game and sub him off at that point as well. Maybe bring on one of the youngsters as well. You know, Lewis Hall's very versatile. He can play in a number of positions as well, so maybe he could switch to left back, and then you bring in maybe Cucurella. you know, we have to see what Graham Potter goes with. But I've gone for Trevor Chalobah and Koulibaly as my centre backs. I've gone for Ben Chilwell as my left back because, again, I do like Ben Chilwell as a defender. I think he's a much better defender from what I'm seeing so far of Marco Correa. I think Marco Correa is brilliant going forward, but I think defensively, especially at left centre back, he's a headless chicken. So I think if we can have Ben Chilwell as our left back, I think it will work. You know, I think he's, again, another player that needs that fitness, a game which he'll probably do well in at Stamford Bridge as well. So I think he needs, you know, that again to get back to full fitness to what we saw last season of Ben Chilwell. I think this is a perfect opportunity to, if not let him play the full match, at least give him, you know, again, the 60 minutes that he probably needs to get some game time under his belt. But in midfield, I've gone for a double pivot of Jorginho and Ruben Loftus-Cheek. Again, the reason behind this really is because, again, I do feel we need to guard against complacency against Dino Zagreb. Yes, we should beat them. Yes, it's Stamford Bridge. Yes, we want to get this Brighton performance out of the system, but I still think we need to guard against complacency. So I've gone for Jorginho again because I feel like the defensive side of him at times, it's a bit hit and miss. So I think he needs Ruben Loftus-Cheek in there with him, who I thought, and we all know that can play really well in midfield. So I think if the two of them can do well, we haven't got Kovacic. I really don't want to put Gallagher in there or Mason Mount in that position. Now, big question around, does Zakaria come into the team ahead of Jorginho? Could this be his opportunity to start a game, to play a game for Chelsea? Who knows? I mean, Graham Potter said he's fit, he's ready to go. We'll have to see, but I do feel that he'll go with Jorginho ahead of Zakaria, and I think Loftus-Cheek has to go into this team. You know, the performances that he's put in at the moment, it deserves a chance, and you kind of look at Ruben Loftus-Cheek as one of the more experienced players going into these kind of games now, as opposed to, you know, the youngster that he was, you know, a couple of years ago. So I think he's got to come into this game and he's got to perform well. And I've gone for Conor Gallagher just ahead of that two of Jorginho and Ruben Loftus-Cheek. Again, Gallagher, another player that, if I had to pick someone out against Brighton, he was one of them that done all right. He done okay. I do like Conor Gallagher in that role, the almost the number 10 role that Mason Mount occupies quite a lot at the moment. And I think if Gallagher can have another game, he could be in contention to play a part on Sunday's game against Arsenal as well. So I think I've tried to go with the experience of Jorginho, Azpilicueta, but I've also tried to bring in some of the players, Chilwell, you know, Koulibaly, who's potentially going to need some of that game time under his belt. And I've also gone for Conor Gallagher just based on current form. Like, I feel that he's playing really well for the team. And of course, it gives Mason Mount the opportunity to be rested ahead of the game against Arsenal on Sunday. My front three that I've gone for is Christian Pulisic, Armando Broja, and Hakim Ziyech on the right side as well. Another player that has got question marks all over his head at the moment is Hakim Ziyech, because I don't feel like he does enough for the squad. I don't feel like he performs enough when he comes on off the bench or when he starts games. I just feel like his whole game, very much like Raheem Sterling, has dipped and dropped heavily at the moment. So I'm not really sure what Hakim Ziyech will start if he does come on or he features any part of the game. I'm not sure what we're going to get from him, but I do feel, you know, he's probably going to offer us something. And I do feel he plays better in the Champions League games as opposed to the Premier League games. Not sure why, but that's my take on Hakim Ziyech. I think Patrick Aubameyang will not play, will not feature, will not be anywhere near this squad. He should not need to come on. I think we should have enough to deal with Dinamo Zagreb on the night. So I think if Armando Broja can get the full 90 minutes, we do have the options of Raheem Sterling that can play in that role, the number 9. You know, Kai Havertz played there against Brighton as well. So there are options. He might bring on Aubameyang, but I think if I was Graham Potter, I'd rest him for Sunday, which again, I've said it about 3 times now, it's a massive game. We need to win against Arsenal. So that's a key game that we've got to win. But I've gone for Christian Pulisic because there were signs that Christian Pulisic in certain games can do well. And again, I feel like he does okay in the Champions League, maybe against a team with a slower tempo to them. I think this is one of those games that I think Christian Pulisic will need to have a good 8 or 9 out of 10 performance, really, because he's one of those players that's on the decline at the club. Question marks again over his head. Can he play the way that we need him to play? So, I think he's got to perform well, and he's got to at least get the ball into the box and beat his defender, because he didn't do that against Brighton, which was shocking. But of course, we normally wrap these videos up with a prediction. So the prediction that I'm going to go with is 2-0 Chelsea. I think it should be a very easy game for us. We should be able to control the game, dominate possession. We should be able to ping the ball around, get the ball around as much as possible, and do what we need to do to secure the 3 points. I think that's all we really care about, is the 3 points at the moment. So yeah, fingers crossed we can get the 3 points against Zagreb, and we can end the Champions League on a high. I mean, that's the main thing about it. We got to end the Champions League on a high. Go into that Arsenal game as well and perform really well. We've got the subs on the bench as well if we need them. Like I said, we've got a couple of youngsters on there as well. I'm expecting to see Carney Chukwuemeka come on at some point, because I think he's really impressed me when we've played him in the 2 games. I think he featured against Wolves in one of them as well. But he's come on, he's done well. Looks very powerful, very strong. I like the look of him, so we'll have to see if he can come on as well. So I've gone for 2-0 as my prediction. Hopefully we can beat Arsenal at the weekend as well. Let me know your thoughts in the comments about what your scoreline will be, what your predicted lineup would look like as well, and anything Chelsea related. Drop all your comments below. Don't forget to hit the Linktree link in the description as well. That will take you to all the social accounts and all our podcast episodes as well. This has been T.Dot. Until next time, stay safe and thank you very much for watching.